so now let's talk about different organizations that affect the public accounting profession. When you think about getting a set of audited financial statements down here, those audited financial statements are the result of a joint process, right? So first, management has to follow all the rules and regulations around financial accounting to come up with those financial statements in the first place. The next thing is, okay, then auditors have to go audit those financial statements using auditing standards. So this chart is trying to kind of bring it all together and show you, hey, for both private and public companies, this is where your financial accounting standards are coming from that management has to abide by in their preparation of the financial statements. And this is where your
auditing standards are coming from,
depending on private versus public, that you must abide by as an auditor when you're going through and trying to assess these financial statements for accuracy. So for both private and public companies, they are going to be getting their financial accounting standards from the FASB, all right? So the FASB is the one in charge of the codification. Yep, so we have a slide on the FASB. So this is the one. They produce the ASC, or Accounting Standards Codification, which is used as a source of US GAAP. All right. So they're the ones who are providing management with those financial accounting standards that they need to be able to prepare the financial statements. Now, if I am auditing a private company, my auditing standards will be coming to me from the Auditing Standards Board. Aicpa oversees the Auditing Standards Board. Auditing Standards Board issues auditing standards for private companies. So remember, if I get a set of financial statements from a private company, management used GAAP coming from the FASB to prepare them, and auditor used ASB auditing standards to audit them. Now, let's talk about public company. All right, so if I'm in a public company, or auditing a public company, I should say, again, management is still using US GAAP coming from FASB to prepare the financial statements, and the auditor is using PCAOB auditing standards to audit them. All right, so the ultimate product is going to be the results of these accounting standards and these auditing standards if you're a public company. So let's talk a little bit about the ASB and PCAOB. And one quick thing to mention before we move on is you see, okay, AICPA up here, SEC up here. For the most part, these organizations defer their standard setting authority to these lower boards, which is why we're spending most of our time talking about these boards. But once in a while, you know, the SEC in particular will come out with some very influential regulation that kind of changes the landscape. So examples of this would be Securities Exchange Act of 33 and 34. So we know, we already talked about in chapter 1, that these acts are why audits are now mandatory for public companies, right? So clearly that was a huge change at the time. More recently, SEC gave us our lovely Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, which we know also again completely changed the landscape of public accounting as we know it, particularly with Section 404, which covered all the everything around internal controls. And now we have to report on efficacy of internal controls in the financial statements, and auditors have to audit that. They do give these sort of landmark regulations once in a while coming down from the SEC, but most of the time they are deferring their standard setting authority to FASB, PCAOB, ASB. All right, so we already talked about this slide, the FASB. Let's talk about AICPA really quickly. So we know they have a lot of different functions. So they have the auditing standards for non-public companies, but they're also where we get auditing standards for different types of companies, such as government and nonprofit. There's also other things coming from the AICPA, so that includes the Code of Professional Conduct, which auditors for both public and private companies must abide by, and that's all we'll be talking about in chapter 19 is going to be that Code of Professional Conduct, quality control rules, and those are all coming down from AICPA. They also prepare and grade the CPA exam. So hopefully you will be interacting with the AICPA quite soon. And they also administer peer reviews for non-public engagements. So every 1 to 3 years, basically what happens with private company audits is somebody else has to come in and review your work and make sure you're doing a good job. So for private company audits, a peer will come in and review your work. So if I'm EY, KPMG can come in and review some audits for me, give me some feedback. What am I doing well? What do I need to do better? For public company audits, actually, we don't have a slide for it, but the PCAOB comes and performs an inspection, right? So it's like this independent regulatory body. And this is another change that came to us from SOX. And people tend to be pretty scared of the PCAOB inspectors. So we definitely have lots of scrambling, lots of checklists to make sure we're always prepared for that PCAOB inspection. And even then, even when we know we're prepared, still pretty scary. And the PCAOB inspection reports are actually released publicly. So that's another reason why people are scared, because they'll contain lists of deficiencies in the work of each audit firm. Right? And nobody wants their PCAOB inspection report to come out and have a long list of all the things they're doing badly for everybody in the world to see, right? Like nobody likes that. Just as you wouldn't like if somebody came and looked at your work and then, released publicly all the stuff you're doing bad on. So PCAOB does those inspections now for public company audits. AICPA does these manages these peer reviews for private company audits, but basically they'll get a peer to come in and look at you. In terms of other regulatory bodies, again, I know I'm being a bit US centric today, talking about SEC, PCAOB, et cetera. So, and US GAAP, right? So if we're in an international setting, so the international counterpart to the FASB providing the financial reporting standards for management to follow is IASB, and the international counterpart to PCAOB is IAASB. So they'll give you the auditing standards, which are ISAs, that you have to follow as an auditor if you're conducting a audit in that setting. And we all know that GASB give us our accounting standards for government agencies, right? And we said the AICPA gives us our auditing standards for government. So here, GASB for financial reporting standards, and still AICPA for the auditing standards if you're in a government.